Letters to the Moon, A Postman's Quiet Journey. Chapter 1, The First Letter. The house I live in isn't much. A small cabin, tucked at the edge of a sleepy forest, far from the hum of cities or the rhythm of clocks. It stands on a gentle slope, facing a narrow meadow that stretches toward the horizon, though my eyes, in truth, are always drawn upward. The moon hangs above, pale and constant, casting a soft glow through the crooked windows at night. It's never too bright, never too far. Just enough to remind me. I am a postman. But not in the usual sense. I deliver letters that are never answered, to a destination that has no street, no number, no door. My route lies along a path only I can see, and my deliveries are for the moon alone. Each evening, as twilight pools into the corners of the world, I begin. I light a lantern by the door, a glass one, etched with tiny stars. I pack a single letter in my satchel, always sealed in a silver envelope. And I set out, with the quiet resolve of someone who has walked this road many times before. Tonight is no different. The letter in my satchel feels light, as they all do. I haven't read it, I never read them. That is part of the quiet vow I took when I began this strange job, or calling, or whatever one might call it. The letters are not from me. I am only the carrier. I step onto the path, which winds through the forest like a ribbon of moonlight. The trees bend slightly as I pass, though there is no wind. They seem to recognize me, or perhaps they, too, are part of this old, wordless arrangement. Birdsong fades, replaced by a gentle hum, a kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of unseen things. I walk slowly. There's no need to rush. Every few steps, the world shifts slightly. A new color appears where green should be. The grass glows faintly underfoot, as if lit from within. A squirrel with shimmering fur watches me from a low branch, blinking slowly, as though dreaming with open eyes. The further I go, the more the ordinary dissolves. It's a soft unraveling. Soon, the path leads me to the field of paper blossoms. The blossoms bloom only at night, and only for those who walk without seeking. They open in silence, releasing the faintest scent of old ink and fresh snow. I pause there every night, letting the petals brush against my fingers. They feel like folded pages, warm and waiting. I reach into my satchel and take out the letter. The silver envelope glints in the moonlight, smooth and cool. There is no name on the front, no address. Only a small symbol, half a crescent, drawn in white wax. With slow steps, I place it beneath the largest blossom. The petals curl slightly as if to read, then fold gently around the letter. And then I wait. Not for a reply, there will be none, but for the moment of stillness that follows. The moment when the world seems to lean in and listen. It's the quietest moment of all, and I cherish it. I sit on the grass, crossing my legs, and look up at the sky. The moon has shifted just a little, peeking through a web of clouds. I don't speak to it, not out loud. But sometimes, I wonder if it hears me anyway. I wonder who writes these letters. They appear in my mailbox each morning. A plain wooden box nailed to the fence post beside my door. Always one letter. Always sealed. I never see who delivers them. I don't question it anymore. Maybe it's better not to know. I lie back on the field, arms behind my head, and listen to the sound of the blossoms closing. They do so with a softness I can only describe as thoughtful. Above, the stars blink in slow, lazy patterns. Time feels syrup thick here. The kind of time you don't measure. After a while, I rise, brushing faint flecks of stardust from my coat. The path back is never the same as the path here, but it always leads me home. Sometimes it winds through misty orchards where the fruit hums in sleep. Sometimes it curls past glassy lakes that reflect not the sky, but forgotten dreams. Tonight, it takes me through a corridor of lanterns, dozens of them, floating midair, their light swaying gently. They know me too. They drift aside to let me through, then resume their silent dance behind me. Back at my cabin, I hang my satchel by the door. I sit on the porch and pour a cup of something warm and nameless from the kettle that never boils but is always full. The moon watches. And I watch back. Chapter 2, The Letter That Glowed. The next morning, as always, I found a letter in my mailbox. The air was still and silver gray, that quiet time between night and day when the world holds its breath. My fingers brushed the cool surface of the wooden box, and inside, there it was. A single silver envelope, like every day before. But this one glowed. Faintly. Softly. As though lit from within by a sleeping ember. I held it for a moment longer than usual, feeling the warmth through the paper. It wasn't hot, just alive somehow. The wax seal shimmered slightly, the crescent moon symbol pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. I didn't open it. That has never been my task. Instead, I placed it gently in my satchel, as I always do. Then I boiled water in the old copper pot, though it never needed fire, and poured it over a handful of blue leaves from the jar beside the stove. The brew smelled like cloud petals and rain on stone. I sat in my chair, cupped my hands around the mug, and watched the sun hesitate behind the hills. Even after all this time, I don't rush. The journey to the moon is not made with haste. As evening returned and the long shadows of the trees stretched like sleepy arms across the ground, I set out once again. The satchel at my side felt heavier somehow, not in weight, but in presence. As if the letter knew it was different. The path had changed again, as it always does. Tonight, it began not through the forest, but over a bridge of woven light. I stepped onto it without question. The bridge gave no sound beneath my feet, only a hum, like a soft sigh that echoed my own breath. Below the bridge, nothing. Or perhaps something I couldn't see. Only a swirling mist, faintly tinged with color, as if someone had spilled a watercolor painting beneath the world. As I crossed, I thought of the letter. Who could have written it? Why would it glow? The others had always been quiet, anonymous things. But this one. Maybe the moon had asked for it. Maybe it was an answer. But still, I didn't peek. The promise of the path is that I am only the bearer, never the reader. I have made peace with that. Eventually, the bridge ended on the edge of a floating garden. Yes, floating. Dozens of islands suspended in the sky, tethered by strands of silver ivy. Each one bloomed with flowers that opened and closed with the rhythm of breathing. Petals in colors I don't have names for. The scent in the air was soft and strange, like memories half remembered from a dream you wake from smiling. I stepped from one floating garden to the next, feeling the invisible pull of gravity rearrange itself around me. The laws of the earth didn't apply here. Perhaps they never really did. In the center of the largest island was a single tree, tall and white, with bark like polished moonstone. Its leaves shimmered, and from its branches hung delicate lanterns that moved even without wind. Underneath, a small pedestal stood, shaped like a folded envelope. This is where I left the glowing letter. The moment I placed it down, the pedestal accepted it. The paper melted into light, drifting upward like fireflies. The tree responded. Its branches lowered gently, as if bowing. And then, for the first time since I began this ritual long ago, something else happened. One of the lanterns descended. Slowly, carefully, like it was choosing me. It floated down until it hovered at eye level, and inside it, I saw shapes. Not letters, not words, just soft impressions. A hand. A crescent. A path. A smile. They flickered like candlelight on water, barely there. But somehow, I understood. Not with my mind, but somewhere deeper. It was a thank you. Not in the way we say it, not even in sound. Just the feeling of gratitude, wrapped in stillness. The lantern floated closer. I reached out. It brushed my fingers, and a small strand of light passed into my palm. It didn't hurt. It felt like a memory being planted. Then, as softly as it came, the lantern rose again and returned to the tree. I stood there for a long time. Time, again, felt like it had let go of itself. When I finally turned to go, the floating gardens rearranged themselves. The path home was a corridor of gentle clouds. They shifted beneath my feet like soft fabric, giving just enough support to hold me, but not enough to make me forget I was somewhere else entirely. Above me, stars began to appear. Not all at once, but in slow pulses. First one, then another, then many, like the sky was breathing them into being. I walked quietly, trailing my fingers through the mist. Every now and then, I glanced up at the moon. Still watching. Still listening. When I returned to my cabin, the satchel was light again. I hung it on its peg, poured a fresh cup of the blue leaf brew, and sat on the porch. The moon was large tonight. Almost full. I watched it in silence. And for a moment, I thought I saw it blink. Chapter 3, The Empty Letter. The mailbox was cold that morning. I noticed it the moment I touched the latch, a stillness deeper than usual, like a breath held too long. Fog hung low in the meadow beyond, painting everything in a soft, pearly gray. Even the birds were quiet, as if waiting. Inside the wooden box was the letter. Silver, as always. Sealed with the white crescent wax. But this time, as I held it in my hand, I felt nothing. No warmth. No pulse. No weight. I turned it over. The envelope was sealed tight, pristine as a fallen snowflake. But there was something missing. Not visibly. Visibly, it was perfect. But the way silence feels different in a room where someone has just left. That kind of missing. I placed the letter on my table, next to the window where soft light filtered through the curtain. It looked as if it belonged there. Or nowhere. Out of quiet habit, I brewed my morning cup. Today, the leaves turned a faint violet as they steeped. The steam curled upward, forming small shapes that dissolved too quickly to name. I stared at the envelope. Sometimes, I wonder what would happen if I opened one. But I never do. Because I think the letters are meant for something beyond me, not just the moon, perhaps, but something older. Something that understands without reading. And still, the question lingers, what if there's nothing inside? I slipped the letter into my satchel, gently, as though handling something fragile or half asleep. That evening, I lit my lantern and stepped into the hush of twilight. The path tonight was different, as always. It began as a line of polished stones, each one etched with words I couldn't read. They glowed faintly underfoot, lighting the way like breadcrumbs in a dream. The trees along the edge had long, ribbon-like leaves that swayed without wind, humming quietly. Not music exactly. Just understanding. The further I walked, the more the landscape blurred. Not from speed. Not from mist. Just gently, quietly, things forgot their outlines. Edges softened. Colors melted into one another, like wet ink on paper. I arrived in a valley filled with mirrors. Tall mirrors. Short ones. Round, fractured, rippling like water. But they didn't reflect me. Instead, each one showed something different, an image not of now, but of moments I didn't remember living. A lantern floating down. A single blossom opening under starlight. A hand waving from a window I'd never stood at. The valley was silent except for the sound of light touching glass. At its center stood a stone pedestal, shaped like an open palm. Waiting. I took the envelope from my satchel and held it there for a moment longer than usual. It felt emptier now. As if even the mystery had thinned. Still, I placed it gently in the stone hand. Nothing happened at first. No light. No sound. Just stillness. And then the mirrors began to shimmer. Not all at once. a few at a time. Their surfaces rippled, then cleared. One showed the moon, not as it looks from Earth, but from far closer. Cratered, glowing, vast. Another showed a desk. A hand writing. Slowly, carefully. The pen shimmered like frost. The figure was cloaked in starlight, faceless but gentle. A third mirror simply showed the envelope, this envelope, melting into particles of silver dust. And then, in the mirror nearest to me, something changed. It showed me. But not as I was. I was older. My beard longer, my coat worn thin. I stood before a door I didn't recognize, holding a letter, this letter. I knocked. I waited. And someone opened it, though I couldn't see their face. In that moment, I felt it, the truth that not all messages are sent to be answered. Some are sent to be received. And some, just to be released. The vision faded. I turned from the mirrors and followed the new path that had opened behind me, narrow, winding, lined with paper birds. They fluttered silently as I passed. One landed on my shoulder, briefly, before unfolding and floating upward like a forgotten thought. The sky above had turned to ink, speckled with glowing symbols instead of stars. I didn't know what they meant, but they felt kind. As if someone had written good wishes across the night. I followed the path until it led me to the edge of a pool, perfectly still, perfectly round. No reflection. Just depth. I sat beside it, legs folded, and watched the surface. After a while, the moon appeared, not above, but within the water. I leaned closer. And it spoke. Not in words. In stillness. In quiet. In the way water shifts slightly beneath unseen gravity. It told me that the letter had been received. And that sometimes, emptiness is the message. The act of sending, of trusting something enough to let it go, is enough. I stayed there a long while, watching the stars blink inside the pool. When I rose, the satchel was light again. The way home was through a hallway of sleepwalking statues, each pausing gently as I passed, some holding empty envelopes, some offering soft waves. When I returned to the cabin, the lantern at the door flickered gently. Inside, the kettle had brewed itself again. The moon hung low over the trees, patient as always. I raised my cup in silent thanks. And from nowhere, a paper bird drifted past the window. Chapter 4, The Letter That Never Arrived. Some mornings carry with them a different kind of silence. This one, in particular, felt hollow in the center, like something was missing from the world, and the world hadn't realized it yet. The light through the curtains was gentle, honey-colored. The kettle steamed softly, and the forest just beyond the meadow rustled with the delicate breath of wind brushing through tall grass. And yet, the mailbox was empty. I opened the wooden lid twice, just to be sure. Ran my fingers along the inside edge, as if the letter might be hiding in the corners. Nothing. No silver envelope. No familiar shimmer. No crescent seal. Just wood. And silence. It startled me more than I expected. Not in fear, there was no urgency in this world I live in, but in surprise. A rhythm broken. A breath skipped. For as long as I've walked this path, there had always been a letter. Today, there wasn't. I sat on the porch with my blue leaf tea, watching the sky shift from gold to lavender. Perhaps it was a sign. Perhaps something had changed. But if the moon still hung there, watching me as always, then maybe the journey still needed to be made. With no letter in hand, and no weight in my satchel, I lit my lantern and stepped out into the evening. The path greeted me with hesitation. That was new. Usually, it opened like a memory remembered, natural, quiet, seamless. But tonight, it curled in on itself like a question. The stones were dim. The leaves rustled too loudly, as if unsure of their own place. Still, I followed. Even without a letter, even without knowing the destination, my feet knew how to begin. I passed through a meadow of sleeping clocks. Tall grandfather clocks. Small pocket watches growing like mushrooms. Hourglasses suspended mid-drip. All quiet. All paused. Their hands frozen in different moments. I paused beside one with a cracked glass face. Its hands were pointing to a time I didn't recognize. And then I noticed something else. One of the clocks ticked. Once. Just once. Enough to make the air shimmer. From the shifting air, a door formed. It had no hinges, no knob. Just a frame, standing alone in the field. I stepped through it. On the other side was a town I'd never seen. Empty. But not abandoned. The buildings looked lived in, curtains moved, lights flickered, doorbells softly chimed in the wind. And yet, no one was there. It was like stepping into a letter that had been written but never sent. At the center of the town stood a tall postbox. Ancient. Twisting vines wrapped around its base, blooming with white flowers shaped like folded paper cranes. I approached it slowly. There was no slot to post a letter. No sign. No markings. And yet, I felt it watching me. As though it knew I had nothing to give. And then something curious happened. The postbox opened by itself, with the sound of soft parchment being unrolled. Inside it was an envelope. Not silver. But deep midnight blue. Unsealed. I reached in and took it gently. It felt warm. Familiar. As if it had been waiting for me. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Blank. But the moment my fingers touched it, faint ink began to appear, not in lines, but in images. A path. A lantern. A letter that glowed. A field of mirrors. A postman who kept walking, even when there was no letter to deliver. And then, at the bottom, in writing so delicate I almost missed it. Even silence can carry meaning. I stood there, still as the moon above, letting the quiet fill the space where a message might have been. Then, carefully, I folded the letter and placed it back into the blue envelope. And for the first time ever, I wrote a recipient on the front. I wrote, "To the one who waits and listens, even now." The postbox closed by itself. And in that moment, I understood some letters don't arrive because they weren't meant to. Not yet. Sometimes, they wait until you're ready to write them. I left the town without taking another path. The world folded gently around me, as if I had stepped between lines of a story. Soon, I found myself walking through a grove of feathers. They grew like trees, tall and soft, swaying without touching. Each one whispered as I passed. Not words, but memories of letters never written. Regrets. Hopes. Goodbyes unsent. Confessions too delicate to speak. The air was thick with all the things people almost said. I walked slowly. Not burdened. Just aware. Back at my cabin, the kettle was still warm. The mailbox, still empty. But I no longer felt like something was missing. Because perhaps, for once, I had delivered something of my own. And perhaps the moon, glowing steady in the sky, had already received it. Chapter 5, The Letter That Remembered Me. The letter was waiting before I woke. Not in the mailbox. Not on the porch. But beside my bed. I found it resting atop the folded blanket at my feet, silver as always, sealed with the pale crescent wax, edges unwrinkled as though untouched by time. The morning light had not yet entered the room, and the letter seemed to glow with a hush of its own. I blinked slowly, reaching out. It was warm. Not just from the room, but from something inside. A quiet warmth, like the way your name sounds when spoken by someone who truly knows you. I held it for a long while. No footsteps had crossed my floorboards. No knock at the door. No whisper in the night. And yet, it had arrived. As though it belonged here. As though it remembered me. I placed it gently into my satchel. There was a sense of certainty in my fingers, a familiarity in the way they closed the buckle. The letter knew the route before I did. By the time I stepped outside, the sky was a soft silver blue. Mist clung low to the meadow, weaving through the grasses like forgotten song lyrics. The trees along the edge of the path leaned in gently, as though bowing. I bowed in return. The path was open already, wider than usual, glowing with pale ribbons of light. Tonight, it seemed to remember me too. As I began my walk, the world around me shifted not forward, but inward. Each step felt like falling gently into a memory I hadn't made yet. The lantern at my side swayed in rhythm with something older than time. The road led through an orchard of moons. Yes, moons. Small, hovering, glowing spheres nestled in the branches of tall silver trees. Each orb pulsed softly, casting a gentle light that seemed to whisper stories into the dark. When I passed beneath one, it flickered briefly, and I saw an image within. Myself. Standing in a rainstorm made of falling letters, catching them one by one with a net woven from light. In the next orb, me again. Younger. Sitting by a river of ink, feet bare, watching folded boats drift by. Each boat had a letter inside, addressed to no one. The orchard grew thicker as I walked, until the moons were so dense they became a canopy above. The light shimmered through like soft paper veils. And then I saw it. A doorway. Not a strange one this time. Familiar. Worn wood. A handle I recognized. It was the door of my cabin, right here, in the middle of nowhere. But not now. Not today. This was a memory. I opened the door. Inside was myself. Sitting at the desk, years ago, a letter in my hand. Trembling. Unsent. I remembered this moment. The night I almost wrote a letter to someone I had lost. But I never sent it. I told myself the moon already knew. But now, watching myself from outside, I saw something I hadn't noticed then. The letter had vanished. Lifted itself from the desk. Folded. Sealed. Left quietly, like a bird escaping an open cage. It had become one of the letters I now carried. And this one in my satchel tonight, was it. The letter had made a full circle. Sent by me. Delivered by me. To me. I stepped away from the doorway. Tears didn't come. They weren't needed. There are kinds of joy too deep for tears, too gentle for smiles. Just a stillness that says, you were heard. And now, perhaps it was time to deliver this one again. But not to the moon. To somewhere else. The path shifted beneath my feet. Now it led to a clearing where the stars touched the ground. Yes, stars, settled softly like dew on the grass. They chimed when I walked among them. Soft bells. Kind tones. Each one held a memory of someone I'd never met, echoes of strangers, softly singing in light. In the center of the clearing stood a mirror. Unlike those from before, this one reflected nothing at all. No forest. No stars. No me. Just a surface of silver, rippling with quiet motion. I approached. Held the envelope in my hands. And I spoke. Not out loud, but within. Not in words, but in feeling. I said, I remember you. And the mirror shimmered. Then, for the briefest moment, it showed my face. Not the one I see each day, but the one that remembers. The one I had almost forgotten. The one who had written that letter long ago. I placed the envelope against the mirror. It disappeared, no flash, no sound. Just, gone. Delivered. And for the first time in all my walks, I heard something in return. A voice. No, not a voice. A presence. It whispered, not in language, but in feeling. Some things return, not to be read, but to be understood. I stayed in the clearing for a long time. The stars around me flickered. One by one, they lifted from the grass and drifted upward. A gentle snowfall in reverse. I watched until the last light vanished into the sky. Then I turned back. The path home tonight was a soft ribbon across a sky of dusk. No ground. Just air. I walked as if weightless. Behind me, the stars continued to rise. Ahead, the moon waited. At the cabin, I found a folded piece of paper on my pillow. No envelope. No seal. Just a single sentence, written in my own hand. Thank you for not forgetting me. Chapter 6. The Letter That Was Never Meant to Be Sent. The morning light was softer than usual, like it had forgotten how to shine fully. A mist drifted across the meadow, not cold, not warm, just there. It moved like breath, gentle and steady. And in the mailbox was nothing. Again. But this time, I didn't feel the absence like a missing piece. I felt it like a page turned in a book, quiet, deliberate, natural. Still, I opened the mailbox out of habit. And there, where nothing should have been, was something entirely different. A letter. But not like any I'd seen before. It was made of light. Not glowing, but light itself, folded into the shape of a letter, humming with a stillness that made the air hold its breath. There was no wax seal, no writing, no weight. It simply existed, quietly waiting. I held it in my hands and it didn't resist. It felt both warm and cool, like memories you're not sure you lived or dreamed. My fingers didn't tremble. There was no need. I knew this letter. Though I had never seen it before. I slipped it gently into my satchel. It barely seemed to take up space, but I could feel it resting against my side as if it had always been there. I lit my lantern, the same as always. But tonight, the flame inside flickered with silver light. Not fire. Reflection. The path unfolded differently, no trees, no stones, no floating gardens. Just sky. I stepped onto it as naturally as one might step through a doorway. There was no up or down. Only forward. The stars beneath my feet moved softly as I walked, shifting into shapes I couldn't name. Constellations unrecorded, moving like memories becoming real. And ahead, the moon. But not as I'd always seen it, distant, pale, observing. Now it was close. A great arch of luminous stone and silver mist, cradled in its own silence. No surface. No crater. No shadow. Only presence. I approached with reverence, though nothing told me I had to. It felt like standing before someone you've known your whole life but never met. I took the letter from my satchel. It had changed. No longer folded. Now it was open in my hands, though I had not opened it. And inside, nothing. Still, I felt the weight of everything I had never said. All the moments I had let pass. All the letters I never wrote, but always carried. This letter was made of those. It had never been meant to be sent. Because it had always been here. Inside. I stood in the light of the moon and held it up, letting it dissolve slowly into the air. It did not vanish. It became part of the sky. Part of the silence. Part of me. Then I heard it. A voice, not outside, but within. Not a sound, but a knowing. You have delivered what could not be written. You have carried what could not be held. You have returned what was never lost. And then everything around me grew quiet. Not empty, complete. The stars stilled. The moon blinked, just once. And I turned to walk home. The path no longer shifted beneath me. It didn't need to. Because the journey wasn't changing anymore. I was. As I walked, the light gently faded from silver to blue, from blue to dusk. The lantern dimmed until it was only reflection, no flame, just echo. I arrived at my cabin just as the mist settled again. Everything was in its place. The porch. The kettle. The soft chair by the window. But on the table, resting beneath a folded blanket of dusk, was one final envelope. It was not sealed. Not glowing. Not silent. It was simply there. And this time, I allowed myself to open it. Inside was a single sentence, written in handwriting that looked almost like mine, but older, softer. You were never just the postman. I sat for a long time after that. Watching the sky grow darker, the stars blinking into place like words at the end of a letter. And for the first time in all the letters I had carried, I wrote my own. Just a small one. Not to the moon. Not to the world. But to the silence that had always listened. I folded it, placed it gently on the table, and blew out the lantern.